High five, Peter Dinklage. Hi. I know what you're thinking about tonight's guest, Jimmy Barnes. You're thinking, what could possibly be left to say that Jimmy hasn't already said himself? That's because for the last 3 years, Jimmy's been on a kind of national tour of confession. There's been the two best-selling autobiographies, Working Class Boy and Working Class Man, both of which talked about a childhood of alcohol and abuse and violence, and also an adulthood which was almost torn apart by addiction. Then, of course, there's been 2 live stage shows and a documentary covering the same ground, both of which, like the books, have played to huge audiences. So what is left to say? Well, there's another Jimmy, and I discovered him a few years ago when, to my surprise, I had to have open heart surgery. I'd known Jimmy socially, I guess, for about 20 years, but he wasn't a close friend. And yet, when I felt sick, it was Jimmy who'd been through a similar operation a decade earlier with his wife Jane, who went that extra mile and reached out to check in with me constantly to see that I was okay. That gentler, more generous Jimmy was different to the more amped up version I'd met in the years before, and I hope that's partly who we're going to meet tonight as we try and answer the question, is it true that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? Let's go. Please give it up for Jimmy Barnes.
Hey, mate.
Good to see you.
Oh, yeah. Good to see you, pal.
Grab a chair. God.
What a day.
I so nearly wore the same outfit tonight. Thank goodness.
Thank God. I nearly wore the same too.
I should ask, seeing as I talked about hearts, how was your ticket?
Mine's pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I felt for you when I heard you were doing it because, you know, I try and tell them before they go in, I say, it's fine, they're really good at this, the doctors really know what they're doing. It was the most painful bloody thing I've ever done in my life. But I didn't want to tell him that because I didn't want to put him on, oh no, you'll be okay, Andrew.
Yeah. You have, over the last 3 years, you have been opening up your heart to the country in an extraordinary way. Are you talked out?
Yeah, not really, you know, it was sort of... It was stuff that I hadn't spoken about, obviously, for forever. You know, I mean, literally, the things that I wrote about in those books, I hadn't even spoken to my family about. So, you know, once the floodgates opened and I started talking about it, it was for quite a while there. It was okay. After a while, it got to the point where I'm going, I'm so sick of myself. You know, I don't want to talk about me anymore. And so now, everything that I've sort of learned from writing those books has sort of taken me to this next stage, which is moving forward, looking at the same experiences from a different perspective, which is basically what this new record's about. So instead of talking about myself now, I'll go out and scream about myself.
Scream about yourself. Well,
it'll be so much more fun.
You've had actually such an amazing life and such a big life that it's hard to know how to put a fence around it. So I thought what we might do tonight is just do it by focusing on some particular days, which I think in some ways define you.
Right.
And I want to start with one in 1992. Take a look at this.
What a girl. I was the one on the right.
You were the one on the right?
I was the one on the right. What an incredible woman. You know, I mean, because I was a fan since, you know, since I first heard River Deep Mountain High. I was one of those fans at the age of 16 or 15 or something. I smashed my way into a gig. So I was like a diehard fan, and she's an incredible singer. But when they asked me, you know, like the rugby league rang me and said, oh, you know, we want to pay you a lot of money to go and sing with Tina Turner, I had to sort of stop myself from laughing because, you know, because I would have paid them.
Yeah. Take me back one, because that was the Apollo where you saw her when you were 16. Yeah. You were right up the front.
Yeah.
When you're looking at it, what did you take in?
Well, it was it was a lot, you know, because I spoke about this on my book tour, you know. Literally, I was in the front row like this, and it was Tina's legs like this, you know. And there was all these other legs, the Ikettes were here too. So, but I was glued to her for, not just because she was so beautiful and she was so powerful. She's one of the most emotional singers I've ever seen. Her commitment to her art, you know, it's like she immerses herself in it, you know.
So here was this woman you had idolized, both as a singer and as a performer, and you walk into a studio to record with her. Mm-hmm. Were you nervous? I
was nervous flying there. I mean, I had to fly to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was the nearest big studio where she liked to record with a producer. And I got there and it was like 10 o'clock in the morning and you know, in those days, morning weren't good for me. It wasn't a good time for me, you know, because, you know, I was normally still running from the night before, you see, and I was trying to clear my throat and all this and thinking, oh, you know, she'll need to warm up. And of course, Tina started singing and she was just phenomenal. Like the tone, the notes, everything was so powerful. And I went, gulp, you know, what am I going to do now, you know? But she was one of these people who was really warm and she was really, really nurturing. She sort of encouraged, don't worry, honey, just come on. And she could tell I was nervous.
You said a lovely thing in the Working Class Boy doco that a great singer sings for a bigger power.
Yeah, yeah.
Who's the bigger power you sing for?
All good singers, I think, reach in to find something in themselves that is bigger and better than who they are.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to share, and that's what they want to let loose. And that's normally lurking somewhere in your heart there.
I'm curious, what do you sing to yourself if you're feeling low?
I don't know, you know. I probably sing Nat King Cole songs, you know, because you get a bit melancholy, and you know, you don't, you know, unless you're really angry, then he's a bit too nice to sing because you've got to scream a lot when you're angry.
So when you're angry, what do you sing? You can sing.
I'll sing Wilson. Do you like good music? You know, you sing like one of the screamers. But normally, if I'm feeling mellow, I'll walk around, you know, Mona Lisa, men have named you. And I walk around singing that because I can sing soft and it can be just to myself and nobody has to hear it and I don't have to drive anybody else crazy.
No, but I was actually about to take my clothes off then. That was tremendous.
You're a smooth talker.
Yeah, didn't take much, did it?
Didn't take much, no, I've heard that about you.
Let's go to another day in your life. This is 1983, Cold Chisel's last day.
I'm standing on the outside looking at, I'm standing on the outside looking at.
Do you want to know what I think when I see that?
Yeah.
All right. So when I see that, I think how ridiculously fast we're playing. and I also remember being on stage there thinking, the band's playing too slow. I've got to kick their asses, you know? But that particular tour, that particular show, I just remember singing and it was just chaos going on inside me because it was, you know, I was terrified. I was leaving probably the best band that I'd ever seen. I was thinking, why am I leaving this band? And this is all coming while I'm singing. And what am I going to do now? How am I going to, find such great songs to sing? You know, Don Walker wrote some of the best songs I've ever heard. And I was thinking to myself, maybe this is a mistake. Maybe I shouldn't be leaving. But at the same time, it was sort of like, I knew that launching off the bat, finishing that gig on stage, I'd have to really get my act together real quick.
You must have been so raw.
It was full on. It was really, I don't think I was good company.
Let me take you to another day in your life. We don't have a picture of this. 9 years old, in Elizabeth and Adelaide, the first day you got drunk. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. So my sister, who was a wild girl, was a bad influence on me, my older sister Linda, her and her friends all wanted to get drunk. And of course, they were just a couple of years old, a year and a half, 2 years older than me. And so, the fellas that she were hanging out with were a bit older, but none of them were old enough to drink. So they decided that they were going to send me to the bottle shop to get a drink for them. Because I was 8 or 9, I can't remember. But I was a baby face and I could smile at people and all that. So I went to the bottle shop and I went, oh, mister, I want to buy a birthday present for my dad, What do you think I should get him? He said, oh, what about that bottle of whiskey over there, So I sort of knew what they wanted.
Yeah.
And the guys go, oh, no, I can't sell to you. I said, oh, well, that's what, my dad's working hard. I wanted to get him this. And, I just played it on. And basically, they sold me a bottle of whiskey. And I walked out, thank you, mister. And I walked out and ran the corner. And there was Linda and her gang. And we all rushed across to this paddock. And I remember we all just sculling whiskey straight out the bottle. And the last thing I remember, we're all running around crazy, thinking we're having fun. And then I just saw everything spun around, and I went face down in the dirt. And I don't think anybody noticed, because I woke up when the sun came up, and I was sort of covered in vomit and and red dirt, and I was 9, and I picked myself up, dusted it off, and went back home and climbed back in the window. And what that says to me is the fact that nobody cared. Nobody knew and nobody cared. And so I just got in the house, and it was like, it became a thing.
Let me take you to another day in your life, Sydney,
Okay.
2000, closing ceremony of the Olympics.
Oh, Andrew.
Yes,
So that's what I look like.
that's what you look like.
That's what I
Yes.
look like. But see, I didn't see that back for many years because I really didn't want to, because I was so smashed when I did it that I didn't think I would be any good. But it was better than I thought.
Tell me about the lead up to appearing on stage.
Well, when they asked me to do the Olympics, of course I was thrilled, you know, and all that sort of stuff. But I was also in the throes of total addiction and alcoholism, and I'd wake up in the morning and start drinking first thing in the morning, and so I knew this was going to be at night, and God knows what state I was going to be in by then. But I wanted to do it because it was such a big event for Australia, and everywhere you went, people were raving about how great the Olympics were. And then I thought to myself, they want me to sing at the end, the last day, and they're going to give me a live mic. And anything could have happened. Anything could have happened. So I remember I was sharing a dressing room with Greg Norman, Paul Hogan, and Slim Dusty. All right? And, you know, they're all very quiet people. I wasn't. I remember Greg and Paul were out doing some sort of run through, and Slim and I were sitting there, and Slim's really sweet, you know, he's a really nice man. And Slim was sitting there with his hat on his lap like that. And I'm sort of getting ready to go and rehearse or something. So I just thought I'd warm up, you know, and you know, my warm-ups, it's well known, it's not attractive to humans. You know, I screamed like one of Jeffrey Dahmer's house guests. So I was shrieking really loud, and suddenly this big Maori security guard came in and goes, "What's going on?" And I looked at him, I said, "It was Slim." And he looked at Slim, and Slim panicked, you know, he's going, and then he went out again. But Slim's going, "Oh, you're so funny," you know. But it was interesting to see it. I mean, I think it was better than I thought. But believe me, from there on, I did get worse.
So when you walked out on that stage that night, I'm just trying to get a sense of when you were at the height of your substance abuse, what you might have taken that day.
I probably consumed a couple of bottles of vodka, maybe 6 or 8 grams of cocaine. So I was pretty wasted.
Yeah.
I was pretty wasted. But I mean, and it wasn't because I was not paying respects to the show. I mean, at that point, I was just hoping I could get through it. You know, all it was hoping I could get through it.
Were you terrified?
It was frightening.
You were terrified.
I get frightened for every show. I get nervous for every show I do. You know, I was just terrified I was going to let everybody down, because by that stage, I just felt every day that was letting myself down, you know?
I'm sure most people are thinking what I am when I hear you talk about what you might have had that day. Did you ever think, when you were really hitting things hard, and this was over many years, that you might die because of it?
I thought about it, I guess, but you know, I used to drink and take so much stuff, and people would just fall down around me, you know, and I'd just keep going, and I'd invariably be the guy at the end of the night standing looking at myself in the mirror going, "What's it going to take to kill you?" Whether that was me wanting to kill myself or not, it took me another 10 years to sort of look back on that. You know, I realized I actually got to the point with abuse where I did wake up, and I hadn't done it, but I found a dressing gown cord tied around a rail in the dressing room in a hotel, and I couldn't remember doing it, but once I seen it, I remembered hanging off it, you know, dangling off it, and thinking to myself, lying there for a while and going, "It's not this easy to die," and then get up and went and drank more, you know. And that, when I remembered that, when I seen that there, that was such a big moment for me. Because I used to joke with Jane. I just say, you know, "Don't worry, I'm not suicidal, I'm homicidal," you know. And
very comforting.
Very comforting. But in fact, you know, I realized that from a very early age, I was probably, you know, on the verge of suicidal, you know, because, you know, I remember running away at 8 years old and thinking about swimming out to sea and not swimming back, you know, and that's an 8-year-old.
Do you think that the substance abuse was not an attempt at suicide, but an attempt to mask the feeling that that's what you might want to do?
I think it was probably a bit of both. I think, you know, I never drank for taste, you know, and I never drank to get a little merry. I used to just go hard and to get hammered. And I think it was to stop feeling. It was just you know, whenever I stopped, suddenly I had to live with myself, and I'd be alone with myself, and I'd have to deal with that. But I sort of look at it now since the books differently. I think it was a long, drawn-out suicide attempt. Really, it went for about 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's a horrible thing, but I honestly, I can't understand why else I would do that, why else I would have done that to myself. And just to be completely truthful, I don't know how the hell I survived it,
No, I don't think anyone does.
Yeah.
I think if you give your body to science, science will give it back.
Yes, we'll just put it over there, it'll glow in the dark.
That's right. Get the big tongs. Let me take you to another day in your life, to 2003, Arizona. Trauma group. What happened in trauma group?
Trauma group, oh man. See, I went to a place called Cottonwood to Tucson, and it was my first real big attempt at rehab. Now, the thing you got to know about rehab is rehab's no good unless you really want to go yourself, and I only wanted to go because I thought then Jane wouldn't leave me, and I thought this will make her, Jane will love me if I go and do this. So I got there, and you get these groups of people, your therapy groups, right? And you all have a primary therapist. And then over the process of the 4 weeks, 28 days you're there, they work out all these different therapies that they try on you. One of the things, they had trauma group. And I'm going, what do you want? I haven't had any trauma, I have nothing. Well, of course I realized I had now, but they put me in trauma group. And I'm not breaking confidence, I won't tell you who it was, but there was this girl who'd been through the worst trauma you can imagine. There was rape and, kept the prisoner and all this sort of stuff. And I'm sitting there, I'm going, Jesus Christ, this girl's had problems. And then the next guy, the little rich guy, he's sitting there and he's going, and his trauma, he was traumatized because his father, when he gave him his first car, gave him a BMW, but it was a manual instead of an automatic, and he was really, all his friends had, and I'm going, you fucking idiot. so I'm going up and I'm, what are you talking about? Did you hear what this girl said? And they threw me out of trauma group because...
You were the trauma.
I had the trauma.
Yes.
Trauma had become the trauma.
The trauma. But your kids came over.
Yeah.
And they told you some truths about you.
They told me some, well, they have, I remember, and I was going crazy there because, I had suddenly 4 weeks of living with myself and my own feelings. It was a really difficult thing. But in the end, I just took to just immersing myself in whatever they asked me to do, and I thought, this, because they all said they're talking to me about abandonment issues, and I'm going, abandonment, schmandonment, Yeah. I don't believe in all that stuff. And it was about 3 weeks in. They would tried all these different therapies, and finally, the penny dropped. I thought, oh shit, nobody's abandoned me. I've abandoned myself. I abandoned myself at the age of 3 or something. Because I just wasn't safe in my own environment. So I've just been escaping ever since. And the final week, they have family week, and of course, my kids had to come and sit and tell me, how I made them feel for the last few years. I mean, Mahalia, my eldest daughter, Mahalia, who'd been on the road with me, touring with me, and seen me at my worst. One of the things that I really remembered was, she said to me, Dad, I used to ring your room and you wouldn't answer. Normally because I'd only just gone to bed like 5 minutes before she rang. And it'd be like 12 o'clock in the next day. And she said every day she'd go and get the key and she'd go to my room to wake me up, not knowing whether she was going to find me dead or not. And so, suddenly I realized, not only have I been an asshole to myself, but I'd traumatized my children, and part of what I've had to deal with since getting myself together is the fact that, my relationship, I was abusive and just in a different way. And it was just, and it was really difficult to live with.
Let me take you to another day in your life, 1997. Michael Hutchence's funeral. You went to view Michael's body a couple of days before he was buried. And Jane wrote a poem and slipped it into Michael's pocket.
Yeah.
Do you remember what that poem was about?
No, it was her personal thing for Michael, which was fine. But Michael was a good friend of ours, and Michael was one of the. He was a great fella, and it was just so sad to see him, disappear like that. I mean, Michael was one of those guys. I've joked about this, but we'd be touring together, and we'd get calls to the lobby at midday to go down for a photo shoot for the press, and I'd get up and I'd sort of, I'd put my best clothes on, try and look as good as I could, and Michael would put on a dressing gown and his R.M. Williams and a hat and walk downstairs and still look better than me, you know? Which really pissed me off. And I remember when Michael came back for that tour, and he looked really bad, and I knew he'd been having a hard time, and it was one of those things where I rang him, and I said, oh, you know, what are you doing? Should we get together? And he was busy, and I was busy, and we said, oh, we'll do it next week or something. We'll get together next week, and he didn't make it through the week. And that makes me really sad, because that's what too many blokes, you know, do that thing. Yeah, we'll catch up. We don't want to talk about it now, you know. We'll catch up later. But he needed somebody to talk to then, and unfortunately, none of us were there for him.
If you could have that conversation again, how would you go about it?
Well, you know, hindsight's a good thing, but I certainly wouldn't have done it on the phone.
Yeah.
I was literally living, you know, 3 kilometres from the hotel in Double Bay where he died, and I could have quite easily walked there.
Yeah.
If I hadn't been dealing with my own shit and recovering, and if he hadn't been recovering and dealing with his stuff, we could have just went down and sat and maybe, who knows, you know, it's all maybes. Maybe talking to someone else with a different perspective might have helped him get through it. Maybe it wouldn't have, you know, I don't know. But I don't even know why it happened, you know. I'm no wiser than anybody else. I just think it was a horrible accident. I think he's, because I got to the point where I had that rope around my neck, and I know I didn't want to die.
Yeah.
It's an accident.
So with all the work you've done, how has your view about what it takes to be a man changed?
Well, you know, I think one of the big things what changed for me was I always thought I was sort of, you know, a bloke, a man, you know, like I'm tough, you know. You want to be tough, and you want to be, you know, brave, and, you know, charge at things, and I'm not afraid of it, you know. But I'm afraid of everything, you know. But I never let anybody know it. For me, it was all bravado. It was all just fun, you know. And when I finally got to the point where I could look at myself and say I need help, and realize I didn't have the answers, that I couldn't, you know, that I couldn't keep this to myself, that I had to talk to someone. I think that was the first time that I felt courageous, and it was scary, it was painful, but it was much different to beating your chest and saying I'm tough. That's the difference between what I thought being a man was when I grew up, and being a real man, as being courageous enough to feel is what it takes to be a man.
Let me take you to another day. It's somewhere in the 2000s, don't know where. It's in the north of Thailand, and you're cooking for hundreds of monks. How did this happen?
All right. So there's a monastery in the Southern Highlands, the Sanataram forest monks. These vegetarian forest monks live there. And the abbot of this monastery moved back to Thailand. And the head monk, it was his birthday. So there was going to be a bunch of monks all coming for this celebration. We happened to be in Thailand. So we thought, we'll go up there. You know, we used to cook for them in the Highlands. We'd go around there, you know, a few times a week and meditate. And, you know, they used to laugh at me trying to meditate, you know, because I'm like sort of vibrating. And I remember we got to Thailand, and the monastery was like these big caves that were just incredible. But so they're having this. They're going to have a birthday party, this feast, and I knew they were vegetarians. So Jane and I went into the local town, Mae Hon Song, and we had I thought there was going to be maybe 800,000 people. So I bought these pots that were like this big. They were massive, and I was going to make pasta. What's wrong with that? What are you laughing about? So I was going to make pasta because I thought tomato sauce. They would be vegetarian. They can do that. So I, you know, and I'm in there, and I've got like an oar stirring stuff, and I literally, Jane and I, we had to get one of those big, you know, mosquito nets you hang over your bed. That's what we drained the pasta in. You know, we had to buy one of them. So anyway, we were up like half the night cooking. So by about 5 o'clock in the morning, we'd got this all together, and we thought, we need to get a couple hours sleep because the monks all get up early, right? And so I remember lying down, and it felt like 5 minutes sleep, and I could hear this noise outside, and I look out, and it was like Woodstock. There was people from everywhere. The place was packed. There were thousands of people. All these hill tribes people had come down. And it was sort of like the loaves and fishes, you know, because everybody brought something. And so there was a feast for thousands of people.
Right.
And, you know, Jane and I put our bit in. But they all thought it was good. I think they liked the pasta.
That's a very impressive story.
Yeah.
Let me take you to another day in your life, and that's this year. This is this is from your album, your new album, My Criminal Record. This is Shutting Down Our Town.
Shutting down our town.
This song was written by Troy Casadele, and Troy's a good mate of mine. Troy's the nicest fellow in the world, right? And Troy's a great songwriter, great guitar player. He read Working Class Boy, and he said, I was so moved with it, I wanted to write this song straight away about Elizabeth.
You've spent your entire life running away from Elizabeth, and now you're singing about Elizabeth. Why is that?
It's a funny thing, you know? Obviously, my stories aren't short, but the last time I went to Elizabeth, after I'd written all this stuff down and I'd sort of dealt with a lot of it, I was there and I felt a strange sense of belonging. I felt like I belonged, which was a really nice feeling. Troy had captured this feeling that I had about Elizabeth, and that a lot of people have about Elizabeth. He captured it really well. I mean, Elizabeth isn't the greatest spot in the world, you know? The whole community was built around factories like Holden's and James Hardy and stuff like that. And a lot of people, like, that was the thing that gave them a sense of pride. The fact that they had a job, the fact that they could feed their kids, that they could keep their heads above water. And over the years, that factory started shutting down slowly, people getting laid off. And it wasn't only just that they'd taken away their jobs, they'd taken away the whole sense of self, because suddenly they didn't have work and they couldn't feed their kids, they couldn't pay for them, you know. So I just think that it left a gaping wound in the community, and this factory's sitting there empty. And I just hope somebody, hope somebody smart goes and starts building electric cars or something there, you know, because there's a workforce sitting there waiting for a job, you know.
I'm assuming the South Australian Tourist Bureau haven't contacted you to do some work for them.
Well, you know what they do. They do. Yeah. I'm actually, I've been spending a little bit more time. I go back there and visit it now and occasionally. But I bumped into a lot of people from Elizabeth, and there's some really great people who've come out there, and some really great families who've lived there, and people who've had totally different experiences to what I've had there. I think, besides the isolation and coming and being isolated from your families in Britain and stuff like that, there was also the major alcohol problems that my parents had, that a lot of people in that community had. So there was families that lived perfectly normal lives there, and who all got through, and who live there still and think, what is he talking about? Elizabeth was nice, but they obviously didn't live in my house.
No. What was the hardest part for you to rediscover?
It was all of it, because I'd ran from it for 40 years, because all this stuff that I'd hidden from my childhood, abuse and all that sort of stuff. Once that was out, it was sort of like the place wasn't responsible for it. No. It was the people who cared for us that were responsible for it. After I went out on tour and doing the first book tour, where I spoke about this for 50 shows, after about 20 shows, I'd be saying things like, my parents, they didn't know any better. But in the back of my head, I'd suddenly start thinking, you know what? They should have known fucking better. The kids don't deserve to be treated like this, We were just subjected to, like lots of violence. And, I wasn't beaten by my parents, but there was so much violence in the house. People getting glassed, and mum getting beaten up, and dad getting hit with stiletto heels. And I've seen people get their throats cut. And we were, sexually abused by friends of theirs. We shouldn't have been in that position. I don't give a damn how out of it I am, or how, poor I am. I would never let someone, hurt my kids like that. I ended up, like I said, hurting them in different ways. But that physical violence and interfering with us should never have happened. And so the hardest thing was coming to realizing, what? It's not that they didn't love me. They just didn't know how to love. They didn't care. They didn't know how to love.
As you got 50 shows in and you realised that, in fact, you were angry about it, what did you do about that?
Got really pissed. No. It was one of those things where every sort of week I'd write, and then I'd have to speak to my therapist. I'd have to speak to a therapist. I used to literally say, if you see a therapist, you're crazy, But I was crazy. Doing the shows, I'd bring him up and say, look, this, I'm starting to feel this, and he'd say, yeah, that's pretty normal, actually. You should feel this, You should feel angry, you should feel lost, or whatever. So it was getting help, and it was cathartic. It was worth doing, because I did have to get angry so that I could get to the stage of forgiving as well, because you have to go through all those stages of grieving, and I was grieving for my childhood. I was grieving for my life and for my family.
Let's go to a final day or days in your life. I don't know which they were, over 2015-16, in Burma, writing Working Class Boy. And for that, you've mentioned Jane. Let's bring her up. Jane Barnes, please come on up.
Shall I sit there? Jane in the middle?
Am I here?
No. Do you know each other?
I thought we met.
Very good. So, Jane, first of all, thank you, because I know you don't often put yourself in the spotlight like this.
No, I don't mind though.
I appreciate
For you,
it.
Andrew.
I don't think you can't do anything.
So Jimmy's said that you've basically been trying to save him since the day you met. There's nothing harder than trying to save someone who doesn't want to save themselves. Why did you stay with it?
Well, first of all, I didn't know that I was saving anybody.
Right.
I just think, you know, our differences made us, you know, compatible in what we needed from each other. And, you know, I fell in love with him and he made me laugh a lot. I liked having him around. So I never thought anything bad about him.
See, I find that hard to believe, and I say that respectfully, because Jimmy's described a day in his life, and there were many years of substance abuse. So you were living with the consequences of that as well.
Well, I, you know, abused substances with him as well. I went to rehab before him. I didn't stay the whole time that he managed to stay. I didn't think I would ever be in that, you know, addictive stage. I just thought it was forever. I just thought it was a phase, a stage.
Had you had any experience of drugs before you met Jimmy?
I was a pot smoker with my surfy friends at uni and, you know, just tried a little bit. But, and no, I never took as many drugs as when I got to know him.
No.
Sorry about that.
But even then, I was just never in the same level.
So when was the time it felt too hard dealing with what Jimmy was dealing with?
I think probably before he started writing, like, you know, you talked about that incident in the hotel room. That was the first time I felt sad, really sad and worried, because I didn't realise that he was suicidal, even though we'd had several friends that had ended their lives. I never sort of really applied that to Jimmy.
I was very good at hiding things.
Very good at hiding things, and
especially emotions and feelings. I'm really good at hiding it.
In the second book, you wrote very openly about the rock and roll life, sex and drugs and rock and roll.
Yeah.
How did you decide what to leave in and
well,
what to leave out?
There's things. You know, I wanted to be as honest and as straightforward as possible with it, you know, because I didn't want to glorify it. I didn't want to mystify it. But there were certain parts of our lives that are nobody's business, but our own. So basically, they sort of sorted themselves out that way. I mean, the first book to write for me was very difficult because it was stuff that I had to face that I hadn't spoke to anybody about, but it was a lot of the stuff. It was stuff that was out of my control. The second book I found a lot more difficult to write because even though I can understand the impact of nurture and nature and all that sort of stuff, but at some point you have to sort of be able to stand there and say, this was what I did. This is what I did. This is what I own. And you know, you can't sit back and go, oh, my mum left me. So, you know, I've been an asshole for my whole life, you know?
Jane, are there times where you, particularly with the second book, where you wish Jimmy had been less honest?
No, I actually kept out of the second book because I realised early on that he'd tell stories and I'd say, well, I don't remember it like that. And very early on in the second book, I just said, you know,
you write it.
Perhaps, yeah, you write your story because it's not our story.
There are parts of that story that you as Jimmy's wife could not have been thrilled by.
I haven't read it.
I won't tell you how it ends.
Okay.
It was the plumber.
It was the plumber.
And literally, if I'd have sat and like I did the first book, every time I'd finish a chapter, either give it to her to read or read it to her, I wouldn't have got the second book written.
Yeah.
I'll wear whatever I have to wear for what I've done in the past. But from now on, I'm going to be prepared to make the right decisions so that I can make life easier for myself and for the people around me that I love.
Jane, how have you seen Jimmy change?
Oh, I'm just so proud of him, and it's amazing how you've been able to, as a man, talk about fear.
Yeah.
But I'm a lot different to what I was, and I still find myself that I have to, you know, whereas this energy that I have would just be like, and fueled by alcohol and drugs, it would just get worse and worse. Now I get hyperactive, and I must get annoying to Jane sometimes, but it's just natural, and it passes, and it doesn't just stay there for weeks on end.
I'm figuring that when you die, and God knows that's unlikely ever to happen based on experience, but when you die, put him in a rubber coffin so he can keep moving.
Yeah. They're going to have to go down and beat my liver to death.
I'm amazed you have a liver.
You know what? The funny, it's not funny.
Livers regenerate.
My livers regenerate.
Give them
What?
time.
Really? Aha, who
They're
would
one
have
of
thought?
the best
What are you?
regenerators.
Are you one of those things from Game of Thrones?
I'm
What are
I'm
you?
Scottish.
What? What do you mean it's regenerated?
No, they
With
do.
some do.
But I go and like even in the thick of it, I would go to the doctor and I'd have physicals, right? Because
Yeah.
one of the things I did do, I'd be hammered and out of it for years, but I always did something, whether it was doing yoga with Jane or do martial arts or boxed or whatever. You know, I remember going to the doctors quite a few times and doing these big physicals, and the doctor would go, "These cannot possibly be your results. I've got tough genes," because I really did bash myself up a lot.
But
And
your
that's-
heart was broken.
What's that?
But your
my
heart
heart
was
was
broken.
broken.
There we
so,
go.
yeah.
When you had that heart problem, did that really?
That was a big thing for me, because it was when they said to me that you had to have heart surgery. I just thought, you know, this is where it's caught up to you. You know, and I thought I might die, and I was afraid that I might die without sort of resolving everything in my life. And I remember lying in the hospital and just thinking, oh man, you know, this you deserve this. And luckily I had fantastic surgeons, and they did, you know, the surgery, and I came back and then I was in so much pain. You know the pain. It's very, very painful. But I had the best nurse in the world. You know, I had Jane, you know, like looking after me. So, and she tried to kill me when I first came out there.
Really?
Yes.
Exactly how?
Not intentionally.
Well,
but I thought, you know,
that's the worst kind, isn't it?
no, well, I didn't realise.
Paging Dr. Floyd.
I had just got out of intensive care. So, you know, literally I couldn't breathe, and I certainly couldn't laugh, and I couldn't cough or anything. And I just got out, and Jane had gone home. You want to tell it, or shall I?
Well,
No, you tell Jane.
I thought I'd come and cheer him up, and had this nurse's rubber outfit.
Rubber nurse's outfit.
Yeah,
I've seen a picture of this,
Yeah.
yes.
Just the nurse.
And she came in, and her and her friend came in, they're dressed as nurses. And I'm lying there, I'm going, don't make me laugh. And they're lying on me doing selfies and all this sort of stuff. And I go, don't make me, I'm going to fucking die, you know?
It was cross.
And so then Jane went home, and what Jane didn't realise, rubber nurses' outfits aren't made to get off by yourself. They're made to have help. And Jane got home, and there was her and the two dogs, and suddenly she went to get the dress off, and she couldn't get it off. And it was rolling up.
I nearly died.
And then it's trapped here, and she's strangling her. And
So, well, my life started flashing through my head. Like, I could see, like,
the headlines.
I'm going, I can't believe I'm going to die from being strangled. And I sort of was trying to, like, the dogs were scuttling in a corner.
because the
I was
rubber dress went
flapping.
plink, 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 you know?
And it finally got me like this, and I thought, oh, my bits are everywhere. I've got to wriggle under a sheet, because when they find me...
When they find her dead, you say, while her husband was having open heart surgery, she was cavorting around the town in a rubber dress.
You know, the scandalous headline. I thought, oh, my poor children.
And eventually she's like this,
I was
trapped.
like this, trapped.
And how did you get out?
Well, I just cried and lay there for a while, and I thought, okay, I'll meditate, because if I'm going to die, at least I'll be calm.
Rubbery but calm.
And then I just sort of like primordial scream and just pull this thing off and rip chunks out of my hair.
Wow.
Instant karma, you know? Come and trying to kill your husband while he's recovering, and this is what happens here.
That would have been the world's weirdest but sexiest murder-suicide ever.
But really,
Yes.
And only the schnauzers to witness.
and only the schnauzers know.
I want to ask about Grandpa Jimmy now. I believe that your granddaughter Betty is scared of you.
Not scared? No, she's not scared of me. She's...
Well, okay, you say that. Here's evidence.
Evidence?
Let's look at this photo. Look at this. There she's, two separate photos.
Well, she could be a bit scared.
Very good.
No, Betty does things in her own time.
Yes.
And she just was not going
She
to...
didn't want to be in the photo at that point.
Yeah.
Betty is so funny. The other day, she's at the house, and we're over there for Mother's Day, wasn't it? Yeah, and she's there, and we got the steps coming down from her bedroom, and they're carpeted, right? So Betty's sliding down the stairs on the bum like this bum. She goes, "Come on, Dad, you can do that too." And I said, "Nah, I'm a bit old for that." She goes, "Are you 90? No, excuse me, I'm 63. And she said, "Oh, you're as old as my dad." I said, "I'm your dad's dad." She's the cutest girl, and she's really tough, you know, twins. And she's really tough, and I'll do anything she says.
Yeah.
I'm scared of her. She's got me wrapped around the finger. I'll do anything she says. I love her so much.
I love the thought of Grandpa Jimmy. That's great.
Listen, Da. They call me Da. So, which is funny because Da in Thai, kun Da is a Thai grandfather, and in Scotland, my grandparents were Da, my dad. So it worked out perfect.
Works both cultures. I'm going to finish up in a second. Jane, I need to ask you, does he overshare all the time now? Do you sometimes wish he'd just shut up?
When he does, I just say, "You know what? I think you need to speak to your therapist." That's it's my way of saying, now it's time. It's a time.
And then when she says that, I think, I need therapy for that.
Well, if the first book had the revelation about being abused as a child, the second book had the revelation about you attempting suicide.
Yeah.
If you do a third book...
Well, I've started a third book. But the idea is to be short stories. So these stories that I've forgotten, that were little signals, and each of these little signals helped me get through to where I am now.
But they're really positive signals now.
Yeah.
And I think all that running away, that's all that's come out. You had to say or speak all those things in your books, and now with now he can look back at his life and see some lightness, some light.
And yeah, you see lots of great things in there. You know, there's lots of things that you just didn't realise that were, you know, that was staring you right in the face. And I see it every day now. Like, you know, I'm one of these people. Like, I get up and I'll get excited because there's a new rose in the rose bush that I can pick for Jane. You know, and I'll go out there, and it's just like it's a little thing, and it's just something like if you had said to me 10 years ago that I'd be out picking fucking roses. You know, yeah, I would have gone,
and
"You're
putting
nuts."
them in a vase.
And I'm getting good at,
You're good at flower arranging.
This is what's happened.
This is what we always knew would happen.
Listen, this is true. This is what happened. We went and seen, what's it called?
About Queen Anne.
Queen Anne, the great film.
The movie. Oh.
Right.
Anyway, it's this great movie, right? And it's full on, and she's sleeping with chicks everywhere and all this sort of stuff. And I'm sitting there, and Jane and I watch this film, and I'm going, "Oh my God, I'm looking at the fucking flower arrangements. What has happened to me?" And I said, because I leaned over, I said, "Oh, that's a nice arrangement." I go, "Oh, fuck, did I say that?" So really.
Well, we look forward to your gardening show, Jimmy, and your flower arranging show. Thank you both so much, and welcome back.
Thanks, mate. Nice to be alive.
Jimmy. Thanks.